All right. Thank you, folks. Sorry we're a little late. Some locked door problems and IT problems, but I'm glad everyone's here. And thank you all for being here. My name is Rip Sullivan, sometimes known as Delegate Sullivan, also sometimes known as a partner in this law firm. And on behalf of my colleagues here at Bean Kinney and Corman, I want to welcome you here to this debate this evening and thank you for coming. These are important issues we're going to be talking about during these two separate debates this evening, having to do with public safety and criminal justice reform and how we go about running our criminal justice system. And so I'm just thrilled to see so many Arlingtonians here eager to learn what these candidates have to say. It is, to my way of thinking, really fitting that Bean Kinney would host this event. I joined Bean Kinney now 9 or 10 years ago when I joined the General Assembly. And I came to Bean Kinney for a lot of different reasons. I knew a lot of the lawyers, knew what an excellent law firm it is. But a very important reason to me was what I already knew about Bean Kinney and its deep commitment to its community and to the civic and charitable life of Arlington County, specifically in Northern Virginia more broadly. The lawyers here are always involved in civic and charitable events. On another night of the week, you come in here and this room will be full of some board, some nonprofit board meeting with one of our lawyers on that board. Always involved as an institution, as an organization. Bean Kinney sponsors lots of things around Arlington and Northern Virginia more generally. So it has a great heart and soul as far as I'm concerned. And when Devanshi Patel, who is terrific, where's Devanshi? There she is. Everyone here knows Devanshi Patel. When she called my partner Christian Lapham and said, we're looking for a place to hold this event, Christian ran it up the flagpole, and I was not surprised when, in short order, we said, yes, we'd love to do this. So on behalf of all my colleagues at Bean Kinney and Corman, I want to welcome you here this evening. I know you're going to enjoy and learn a lot from this evening's proceedings. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Devanshi. Devanshi.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you very much. Well, good evening. On behalf of the Center for Youth and Family Advocacy, better known as CYFA, we welcome you here tonight to the lovely offices of Bean Kinney and Corman. By way of introduction, I will just say that CYFA was born of the criminal legal system, and it works to keep kids out of the legal system. And we focus on Frederick Douglass's famous words, it's easier to build strong children than repair broken men. And so we're particularly interested in this particular forum and these two particular races, of course, for all the obvious reasons. CYFA understands that healthy and safe communities begin with healthy and safe community conditions. And so CYFA uses collective impact, restorative practice, education, and advocacy to ensure that all kids and families have the resources necessary to thrive. We are so excited to have the trust of the Arlington County Board and this community to serve as the county's provider for youth diversion programming through restorative justice. And we're also proud to have the county board support in fostering opportunities to build and rebuild bonds within this very special community. So we are so excited to bring this forum to you today because, again, we come from the legal system, we understand legal procedure, and it's our hope today that the discussions that you hear tonight will broaden your understanding of how we treat matters within the legal system and how we as a community can meaningfully foster and promote community safety through a law enforcement lens, the umbrella under which both of these offices fall. So in preparation for tonight's forum, we asked you to submit your questions, and my goodness, we received a lot of them. More than we're going to be able to handle tonight. The candidates tonight, what you will hear and what you will see is that the candidates may not get the same question. The questions have been individualized and particularized because a lot of debates have already happened, right? And we want to be able to hear and differentiate between the candidates. That is our goal here tonight. So what you will hear tonight is an opening statement from all the candidates, 2 minutes in length, and we're going to be keeping timers on all of this. We want to get through as many questions as possible, so we will be making sure that we have good timing. We also will have, as I said, differentiated questions of each candidate, 1.5 minutes in terms of responses, There will be no rebuttal tonight, and there will be no closing statement by any candidate. You've seen on your chairs, in the midst of all the literature, were little note cards. If you have a question that you would like to submit, please write it down on that note card, and you can send it to the end of the aisle. We'll pick it up, and what we are planning on doing is actually collecting all of the questions, sending them to the candidates, to their campaigns, and asking them to provide responses to the questions that we were not able to accommodate for tonight. What we will do is at the sign-in sheet, we've asked you to provide your email address. With that email address, we will send you an email or a mailer that puts all those questions on there so you can get some additional information, particularly if your question was not asked. So tonight we are really fortunate because Juanita Ferguson, a shareholder here at Bean, Kinney & Corman, has agreed to moderate this event. Juanita is a powerhouse. She's a fierce litigator. She's known and highly respected in this community. She also is known for not only her litigation prowess, but also her innovative solutions to complex litigation issues. We are really in good hands with Juanita tonight, and she is going to keep a tight grip on tonight's forum. Thank you, Juanita, for your steady hand. And many of you have already met Milky. Milky is part of our Youth Advisory Board. She will be helping us tonight in terms of making sure that we stay on time and stay on track because your time is valuable to us. So thank you, Milky, for helping us organize the event. And at the end of the night, you will be hearing from Aria. She's also part of our Youth Advisory Board, and she will close up the evening for us. So that is it for me. I'm going to turn this over to Juanita. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight at this event. Thank you, Juanita.
Thank you. Thank you, Devanshi and Saifa, for this opportunity to moderate tonight's candidate forum. The Arlington County Sheriff's Office and the Office of the Commonwealth Attorney for Arlington County and the City of Falls Church certainly have important law enforcement functions in our community. What is often not known or maybe misunderstood by some in the community is how the philosophies, the policies, and the practices of each office affect the greater community. I am excited to explore these issues with you and the candidates tonight. Tonight we will be starting with the candidates for the Arlington County Sheriff, but the format will remain the same for the Commonwealth's Attorney's race. The candidates are already seated, and we will start with introductory statements of no longer than 2 minutes. We did a drawing for who will start, and the order will be Jose Quiros, James Herring, and Wanda Younger for the first part of the forum, and Josh Katcher and Parissa Dagani Patel for the second part. Now, as Devanshi mentioned, we will then move into the discussion. I will ask each candidate a question. You may not receive, I'm saying this to the candidates, you may not receive the same questions, and that is purposeful. We're approaching the finish line in these races, and we are trying to better understand your policy positions and the differences between each of you. The questions submitted online or this evening aim to do just that, to provide the community with critical and pertinent information regarding your candidacy. There will be, again, as Devanshi stated, there will be no rebuttal tonight, and I may have to cut you off if I find that you're spending time answering a prior question rather than the question posed of you. We trust that this will not be an issue. Are we ready? Let's begin. Jose Quiros, introductory statements.
Yes. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting Saifa, and thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Jose Quiros. I am the son of Honduran immigrants. I grew up in Arlington County. I went to Abingdon, Kenmore, Swanson, and after my father passed away when I was 13, my mom sent me to Bishop O'Connell High School, which I thought was a great idea. Thanks, Mom. And it was a great idea. I met a lot of new people, and I'm very thankful and fortunate to have attended that school. After graduating high school, I joined the United States Marine Corps, where I served for 4 years. After serving in the Marine Corps, I joined the Arlington County Sheriff's Office. My second day was September 11th, 2001. I joined the Sheriff's Office because I wanted to continue serving my community, a community where I grew up and a community where I wanted to make a difference and make change. Over the last 21 and a half years of being in the sheriff's office, I've learned a lot, and I've developed relationships with my staff, county leaders, and community leaders. As sheriff, there's 3 things I want to do that I want to focus on. Running a safe and progressive jail focused on rehabilitation, community engagement, and my staff's wellness and career professional development. I've already done things in these 3 categories as sheriff in my short 4.5 months as sheriff. I'm bringing in biometric technology so that we can ensure that no one else dies in our jail. This is a tool that we're going to use on top of the things that we're already doing. A loss is a loss. A loss is to the community, to these families, is a loss to my staff as well. We're human beings and we feel lost just like everyone else does. And it's very, very imperative to me that we have no more deaths in the jail. Mental health is another thing that we're going to focus on. Mental health of my staff and of those that we care for. Community engagement. Community engagement is something that I'm going to focus on, and I've assigned a deputy sheriff to the community engagement division already.
Thank you.
Thumbs up. Okay.
It's all right if I stand. I really don't like these chairs. These are some of the most awkward chairs I've sat in. Awkward height. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm James Herring. I'm running for Arlington County Sheriff. I'm a longtime Arlingtonian. I came through Arlington Public Schools, Jamestown, Williamsburg, Yorktown. Please don't hate me, Wakefield, WNL. Love you guys too. Went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison on Army ROTC scholarship, graduated, became an Army infantry officer in the United States Army Virginia National Guard. Came back home here, found a full-time job with DC Police. It was just pure math that I joined DC. They started 11,000 higher than Arlington at the time, and being a poor college graduate, that seemed to resonate with me. So after working there as a field training officer in the 8th Ward or 7th Police District, Anacostia neighborhood, if anyone's not familiar with DC geography, I started looking across the river to Arlington, coming back home because there was a very robust schedule that was keeping me very gainfully employed, and I wanted to come home and work amongst people that were familiar to me and have a better work-life balance. I've been able to use that balance to become a rowing coach and give back to the community in addition to becoming an Arlington County police officer. I'm running for Arlington County Sheriff because there's a lot of issues. Many Arlingtonians aren't even aware there is a sheriff's office. They aren't aware that they have the same powers that I do as an Arlington County cop. They aren't aware that there have been 8 in-custody deaths in the past 10 years. They aren't aware of the mental health crisis going on in law enforcement or in the community. I want to address all these issues. I want to address the morale and retention issues amongst the deputies. And I want to take the sheriff's office and make it be on equal footing with the police department, an agency that can lead the way into the future for policing standards, for jail standards, and just something that we as Arlington can be proud of as human beings, as Arlingtonians, and that I can be proud of as a law enforcement officer. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Cypher, for hosting this event tonight. My name is Wanda Younger, and I am a longtime Arlingtonian with 30 years in the county. I have 2 adult sons, I have 3 grandchildren, and I have a daughter-in-law who was born in Honduras. I retired from the Arlington Sheriff's Office in 2020 as a lieutenant and a director of pretrial services with over 30 years of service. I have a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement Administration. I have obtained jail manager certification, and I've had numerous advanced training to include leadership training through the FBI and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. My platform is comprehensive, and for the past 4 months, I've addressed 3 pillars. As your sheriff, my focus is to improve the lives of the community, improve the lives of staff, and improve the lives of one of our most vulnerable populations, our detainees. I will work with the county board and state legislators to provide mental health care and medical services to those detained, staffed with physicians and psychiatrists 24 hours a day, as recently implemented in the Arlington Crisis Intervention Center. I'll invest in the training and resources necessary to prioritize trauma-informed jail management practices. I'll reinvigorate the Auxiliary Deputy Sheriff's Program to assist in providing assistance and mentorship to our youth and increase community safety. and I'll strive to ensure that those with disabilities have the necessary resources and access to thrive and be self-sufficient. I have a worldview of the Sheriff's Office that differs from the other candidates. I have the understanding that the Sheriff's Office is the last line of protection of the Constitution for our citizens. And that historical context is what drives my motivation and my understanding of the Sheriff's Office in today's society. My team is ready day one to make changes. Thank you.
First question, 1.5 minutes per candidate. First candidate to answer will be Wanda Younger. In your position as a public servant in Arlington County, what has been your biggest challenge and what have you learned from it?
As a public service in Arlington County, with over 30 years in the Arlington County Sheriff's Office, what I've noticed is the mental health crisis that has been increasing throughout the years. As mentioned earlier, there have been 7 deaths in 7 years at the Arlington County Sheriff's Department. And one of the things that I am proposing is to implement 24-hour, 7 days a week psychiatric and physician care within the detention facility. It's time that we revamp our policies to ensure that we are meeting the standards of the emergency room at the Virginia Hospital Center. I've studied the protocols in terms of what is necessary, what is needed. The Sheriff's Office needs not only psychiatrists and physicians, but they need nurse practitioners as well, and paramedics. That is something that will help with our 24-hour responsibility of those who come into our care. Most of the people that have been brought to our facility, unfortunately, have underlying mental health conditions and medical conditions. In terms of mental health, we first have to address the medical issue, then we can address the long-term mental health care. So mental health has been increasing throughout my tenure when I was with the Sheriff's Department, and it's something that should be addressed immediately in terms of the way that the emergency care is handling and responding to the crisis.
Thank you. Next question is for James. Same question. In your position as a public servant in Arlington County, what has been your biggest challenge and what have you learned from it?
So I think my biggest challenge is, just kind of seeing how we in law enforcement are routinely falling short. The people who, and Ms. Younger did touch on this, the mental health and the medical issues that we have from people who routinely end up in custody. And I've seen firsthand in DC, I've seen firsthand here how oftentimes there's many arrests that we're affecting purely because someone is on the poorer side of society. They're unhoused, they have a mental health disorder that contributes to the unhoused issue or has been aggravated by being unhoused, and they have a medical issue that is either developed by living outside unhoused as well, and all these issues are going unaddressed. The services that we have are not meeting what we need to be providing for these individuals, and oftentimes this is contributing to the rise in crime, petty crime, quality of life issues. This is causing people to feel unsafe in their communities where they live, and so I want to address this holistically because so oftentimes in law enforcement and in government, everything operates in a separate silo. And that's why I'm running for sheriff, is that I want us to be able to reach out and work not only with other agencies in Arlington, but with regional partnerships in Maryland, DC, and other agencies in Virginia, because oftentimes the people who do end up in custody not only have those issues, but they're not from Arlington. So we need to get them connected to services where they'd prefer to call home, so that when they are released from custody, which many of the individuals who are in jail will be reintegrated back into the community, they have a support network to go into and they're set up for success, so they're not released with nothing as a safety net. Thank you.
Jose, same question. In your position as a public servant in Arlington County, what has been your biggest challenge and what have you learned from it?
There's a couple on there, but biggest challenge I would say, and what I want to bring to the sheriff's office is technology. I think technology is lacking. I think that's why I'm going to implement these biometric sensors that are going to assist us in making sure that no one else dies in our jail. There's technology out there, and as someone, I just got back from the American Jail Association conference in Omaha, Nebraska. The technology is out there. We just need leaders that are going to implement this technology, be forward-thinking, innovative, The technology is there. So I'm gonna ensure that no one else dies in custody, especially when you're pre-trial, it doesn't matter. Folks shouldn't be sentenced to the jail to die. So we have the biometric sensors that I'm bringing in. These sensors are gonna capture oxygen, pulse, heart rate, movement. They're gonna augment the things that we already do in the facility, where my staff is doing 15-minute rounds, 4-hour vital checks. We're also upgrading our guard tour system, our scan system, so that now we can scan, forgive me here, we can scan inmate's bracelet, and scanning the bracelet will track movement and track so it'll take away the need for my staff to be behind the desk, and then my staff can now engage more with the inmate population, the folks that are in our care. We also have, so I talked about the biometric technology, guard tour system. Okay.
Next question will be for James. Candidate Younger has proposed placing auxiliary sheriffs in the public schools. What do you think of this proposal and why? If you agree, what do you say to the community who advocated for the removal of police from our public schools?
So I disagree with the policy of putting auxiliary deputies into the schools, and I think the reason is plain and simple that it's going to be very difficult to find the number of volunteers when we're already having trouble finding full-time people to work for law enforcement. Additionally, the number of volunteers to meet a full-time job is going to be very high, and I'm not sure we can meet that with Arlington County Public Schools and still provide the best possible services. I also think, given that the schools did have a relationship and many of the SROs are still on Arlington County Police Department, I myself am a coach. There's many officers who are coaches with the police department. We have relationships with the schools. We're routinely called to handle issues in the schools. And so we do have the relationship. While I know the community, or Arlington County Public School Board especially, voted to remove school resource officers, I don't necessarily agree with the practice that was implemented to get to that decision. I think that it was rushed. I think it was a knee-jerk reaction to a national issue that was not localized with Arlington. And I've heard from so many parents and so many teachers that they would love to see a return to school resource officers. Many of the individuals that I coach would love to see us return to school resource officers because everyone right now in the schools feels unsafe and they don't like the status quo. So and I think it's important to understand too that the school resource officers were there to assist families. They were there to assist the children. The primary duty was, what can we do to make this family whole? What can we do to make this child whole? And they were never there to discipline. That was always up to the schools.
Jose, same question. Wanda has proposed placing auxiliary sheriffs in the public schools. What do you think of this proposal and why? If you agree, what do you say to the community who advocated for the removal of police from our public schools?
I do not agree with putting auxiliary deputies in our schools. Let me explain auxiliary deputies. There's different levels of auxiliary deputies. There's level 1, 2, and 3. These levels are determined by Richmond, the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So a level 1 auxiliary has all the certifications needed, similar to a fully law enforcement certified officer or deputy sheriff. The auxiliaries that the sheriff's office had in the past were not all law enforcement certified. Now, I wasn't in charge back then, but we had people that had weapons and that didn't have the appropriate training. And that's why the sheriff's office auxiliary program was removed. If you're gonna have folks, if the community asks for no school resource officers that are trained in the academy with the hundreds of hours that we receive in the academy, why would you put someone who doesn't have that sufficient training in schools to protect our most vulnerable population, which are our children? What I propose is mentorship programs, and that's why I assigned the first deputy sheriff to work hand in hand with the police department's community engagement division. I have a deputy sheriff who's with the police department's community engagement division, and she's mentoring, reading, building relationships with our children. Those are the things we can do, and full-time deputy sheriffs can do the same thing. We can mentor these children, teach, be role models. The Kenmore Middle School principal is.
And last but not least, Wanda, this is one of your policy proposals. Why do you think sheriff's deputies should be in the public school system, and how would their presence provide more safety? How does your policy proposal align with the community's recent push to remove police officers from schools?
Thank you. Well, the Auxiliary Deputy Sheriff Program is not the same as the School Resource Officer Program. The School Resource Officer Program, amongst their other duties, was investigative and arrest. The Auxiliary Deputy Sheriff Program would be a voluntary program with the ability to provide safety and mentorship to our youth. I've spoken with many people throughout our community who have expressed concerns about the safety of their children going into the restrooms for fear of being assaulted. The Sheriff's Office, the Wanda campaign, Sheriff's Office campaign, is determined to make solutions to address the concerns of the community. It's not just a court operation or a jail operation, it's also for policy making as well. The Auxiliary Deputy Sheriff Program would have a mission statement. They will be trained. Now, what happened previously in the Sheriff's Department because they weren't trained, well, that falls under the leadership of the Sheriff's Office. Under my leadership, the Auxiliary Deputy Sheriffs will be trained. They will have a mission statement, and they would not serve as a role in terms of school resource officers. As I stated before, I've spoken with the community. They have expressed concerns about the safety of their kids, and it's up to us to be proactive and be a part of the solution. And with the Auxiliary Deputy Sheriff Program, not in the role of school resource officers, we could do that.
The next question will be for Jose. Jose, retired Sheriff Beth Arthur chose you to lead the agency upon her retirement in January of this year. What policies and practices have you implemented in this role that differ from your predecessor, including budgetary reforms and management philosophy?
Thank you. January 6th, I took over, and January 9th, I went to every housing unit and introduced myself to the entire population in the jail because it was important for them to know who was leading the sheriff's office. So not only did I introduce myself to the staff, but to those in our care. And to answer your question, one of the things that I'm working on specifically with SIFA is wellness circles. I've had conversations where we're gonna bring wellness circles into the sheriff's office, and these are gonna be able to facilitate conversations with my staff and through SIFA, organized, facilitated conversations where the wellness of my staff is key, where we want to focus on what are the issues, where staff can have a safe space to make conversation and we can come up with solutions. Another thing I did was hire a public information officer. Giving the community information and being forward with the community transparent is absolutely important and something that I'm committed to doing. I'm creating a dashboard that we will upload to our website. This dashboard will have information that's pertinent to the community as far as who's in our care. We're not going to disclose names and specific charges so that you can connect the dots, but just who's in our care. What are the initiatives that the sheriff's office is working on? Where are we going in the future? So being transparent with the community, public information officer. I already stated I assigned a deputy sheriff to the community engagement division.
Next question's for Wanda. What experience qualifies you to run a large facility like the Arlington Detention Center? In your answer, please describe your experience with managing a significant institutional budget, managing a large staff, and related contractors.
As I stated in my opening, I retired from the Sheriff's Office in 2020 with over 30 years of service. I've worked in all three divisions of our Sheriff's Department, the Administrative Division, the Judicial Services Division, and the Corrections Division. I've worked both as a civilian and I've worked both as a deputy sheriff. I retired as a lieutenant and I retired as a director of pretrial services. In my role as a director of pretrial services, I was responsible for managing, creating, and overseeing the budget for pretrial services. As the lieutenant and training coordinator, I was responsible for managing, creating, and overseeing the training budget for the entire Sheriff's Department. I also have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and law enforcement administration, the only one on this panel who has that. I also have significant training through the FBI and the International Associations of Chiefs of Police. I've created programs to help with succession planning. I've created programs to help with staff development. And I've been involved in many committees in terms of requests for proposals, working with the budget analyst as well as the director of corrections. So I have extensive experience, knowledge, worldview to lead the sheriff's office. And
Thank you. Same question, James. What experience qualifies you to run a large facility like the Arlington Detention Center? In your answer, please describe your experience with managing a significant institutional budget, managing a large staff and related contractors. Let's hope you don't have to deal with debt.
Fingers crossed, right? I think Virginia's a balanced budget state, so hopefully there's no debt. So my pertinent experience is I was an infantry platoon leader. I led a platoon of soldiers overseas, which was about 40 soldiers. We were doing 24/7 operations to maintain base security. So that's my direct leadership at small unit. Larger unit, I was a company executive officer, and I was responsible for being second in command for 160 infantry rifle company. We had small arms ranging from pistols all the way up to complex weapon systems to include machine gun grenade launchers, things of that nature. And we had a hand receipt budget of about $20 million worth of equipment. I then finished out my career as a division liaison officer representing a 2-star general to a 3-star general, which culminated in exercises where we were planning basically war games is the oversimplification, and we were coordinating movement for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of soldiers in a hopefully never real campaign. So that's my experience. That's my relevant experience to managing large-scale organizations. You learn a lot from it. You learn a lot from your soldiers. You learn a lot from the various problems that a bunch of idle 20-year-olds bring to you. And I look forward to solving the problems that the sheriff's office and the deputies and the people in custody will bring to me as well, because I know that there's a lot of work to do. But I think that the leadership challenges that I've had to face as an infantry officer and as a field training officer in DC, where I was oftentimes training 3 officers at once, which is a very tall order in and of itself.
Thank you. Next question is for Wanda. You touched on it earlier, but this is focusing on mental health services. Many people currently held or incarcerated at the Arlington Detention Center have a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issue. Does the sheriff have a role in advocating for upstream mental health services? If so, what do you think needs to change?
Yes, the sheriff's office has a role in terms of mental health wellness. The sheriff's office role, while the major role is the managing of the detention facility, the courts, and service of summonses, it's time that we expand our role to meet the needs of society today. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier, in terms of 24 hours, 7 days a week, access to psychiatrists and a physician. I know it was mentioned earlier about the biometrics, and while that is a tool, it's an initial tool and it is a great resource, but when the alert goes off, because the biometric monitors your heart, your oxygen, your blood pressure, but when that alert goes off, you still need someone to respond to the issue. The alert alone is not going to solve the problem or the crisis that's going on. So that's why I'm advocating for not only physicians and psychiatrists, but nurse practitioners, paramedics, so that we can emulate the emergency room. And as I stated earlier, I've studied the protocols so that we can effectively care for those who are in crisis. When someone is in crisis, they must first have their medical needs addressed first, and then we can go in terms of long-term mental health care. So those would be the proposals that I would suggest for the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you. Next question, James. Same question. Many people currently held or incarcerated at the Arlington Detention Center have a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issue. Does the sheriff have a role in advocating for upstream mental health services? If so, what do you think needs to change?
Thank you for the question. So I think that the sheriff is responsible for being the primary advocate for these services, because when people are in custody, that means that they are literally in the sheriff's care. And I think we in 2023 are seeing the result of a criminal justice system that has only focused on carceral services, i.e. locking people up and holding them, getting them to court, and then figuring out, do we release them or do we send them to prison? And I think we need to focus on these resources that are in the middle, the mental health, physiological, medical, things of that nature. And one of the programs that I've looked at that I found out about while on the campaign trail is the HARP program, Helping Addicts Recover Progressively, that's being done down in Chesterfield County, which has a medical doctor serving as a medical director in the jail, who then also trains up physician's assistants, nurse practitioners. They get deputies trained up to be paramedic and EMT level so they can respond to emergencies in the jail as they arise. Additionally, they have a psychologist and psychiatrist to help prescribe medication and then also deal with mental health treatment in the jail so people's treatment can be ongoing. We also need to be getting people connected to Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, things of that nature, so that when they transition out of custody, they have the resources, they have the money from Uncle Sam, hopefully, so that they can pay for continued treatment, so that when they are released, they're not just saying, well, hope you figure it out, best of luck to you, you're not our problem anymore. And that's why I think the sheriff is responsible for advocating for these things, getting people who can be housing coordinators, like I mentioned earlier, not just from Arlington, but
Thank
from the
you.
region.
Same question, Jose. Does the sheriff have a role in advocating for upstream mental health services? If so, what do you think needs to change?
Thank you for the question. I'm glad I get to answer this one. So, specifically to this question, my team is already working on a first of its kind, first in the state, early diversion intervention project. So this is something that we're working on so that we can remove the need to be incarcerated if you're suffering from mental illness and get the help that you need. What's different with this program is that we're using grant money to fund a position so this mental health clinician professional will follow the person through the system. So a lot of times we take folks to the hospital on an ECO, a emergency custody order, or a TDO, a temporary detention order. The person is, we say we sit on them, but the sheriff's office, we have to sit there with them, right? It's a term that we say, but we're sitting there guarding the person, and they're turned over to the hospital, and then they either get treatment, don't get treatment, and then they're released, and there's no tracking. So this clinician would track the progress of the person and ensure that this person receives the services that they need. Another thing that we're doing, because substance use and mental health are usually tied together, is the medication-assisted treatment program. So I had a role in that, where we have a 24/7 medical care in the facility. We have nurse practitioner, we have a doctor, we have nurses. Thank you.
Next question is going to be for James. The subject is diversity. James, when addressing the disproportionate impact of the legal system on communities of color and vulnerable populations, you have expressly connected the legal system with historical genocide of indigenous people and other communities of color and the institutional slavery. If you are elected to serve as the next sheriff, you will do so as a white male. Even as an ally, there are limits to appreciating the impact of centuries of systemic and structural harm. What will you do to bridge that gap?
Thank you for the question. So I can't help that I am a white male, but I do believe that what I can make up for is the fact that I'm a huge proponent of education, being connected to resources, learning what I don't know, and learning from people who are subject matter experts. We are across the river from some of the best museums in the world, the Holocaust Museum, National Museum of African American History and Culture, and they have programs that are specifically tailored to law enforcement. We also are at the crossroads of many universities with great historical diversity. We have Howard University, we have Hampton University down the road from us. So we need to also focus on recruiting from historically diverse places, not just going to people who would traditionally aspire to being law enforcement, but then going to people who typically would not be interested in law enforcement, and then selling the profession to those individuals so we can try to bridge the gap. Because when we are a rich tapestry, when we are a diverse organization, that is when we can try to get all the experiences, and we can provide the best community service to the community. We can talk to people, we can reach them ideally at their level, so we're not just talking at someone, but someone who has a lived experience can have a connection. I see it on scenes all the time when one officer is not reaching someone and we tap out, and that other officer is able to actually get the person to buy into the services that they need, buy into trusting us, which is super crucial, because if you don't trust us, who are the primary face of government,
Thank
you
you.
won't trust the rest of the system.
Next question is for Jose. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are important to workplace culture. Does the Sheriff's Department reflect the gender and ethnic diversity of the community it serves? If not, what are you doing or will you do to address the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Sheriff's Office? What pitch would you make to our young people to join the Arlington County Sheriff's Office?
Wow, that's an awesome question. So I grew up in Arlington, and never, ever, 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 ever would I think I would be sitting here as sheriff, appointed sheriff, candidate for sheriff. So dreams do happen. And that's all because of my family and my community supporting me. So it says a lot about this community. But we have one of the most diverse law enforcement agencies in this area. And because of that, we can connect with the community. The community obviously is very diverse. We have, and I think to speak to that point, you know, our hiring is 21, high school diploma, and valid driver's license. So we don't put people down for not having higher education. We lift people up for having experience. We lift people up for having personality. We lift people up because those are the people that I want taking care of the people in the facility. The people in the facility we know made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. I haven't met the perfect first person yet, so if you have, you let me know. But we're not looking to hire perfect people because we don't live in a perfect world. So I want to hire people that are diverse, people that understand other human beings, people that have emotions, empathy. Those are the people that I want to hire in the Arlington County Sheriff's Office. As sheriff for since January 6th, I
Thank
promoted
you.
5. Thank you.
Wanda, same question. Does the Sheriff's Department reflect the gender and ethnic diversity of the community it serves? If not, do you believe it is important for it to be reflective of the people it serves? And if you are elected to serve as the next sheriff, what will you do to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Sheriff's Office?
Diversity within the Sheriff's Department is extremely important, and the Sheriff's Department is well represented in the areas of African American and Latino staff. But I think it's important that we reach out to other communities as well. Arlington County is probably, if not the most diverse county, the most multi-religious, the most multicultural communities in Northern Virginia. And it's important that we reach out to other communities in terms of the Asian community, the Bangladesh community, the Ethiopian community, because these communities should be represented and it should be reflected in the Sheriff's Department. So it would be important to reach out to these communities, to recruit individuals, and to share what the Sheriff's Office can offer. In terms of reaching youth, I started with the Sheriff's Department when I was 16 years old and continued my career until I retired in 2020. So I know the positive impact of working in the Sheriff's Department and the interactions. You just have to have the appropriate role model in leadership. No one is perfect, but when you're the lead of an agency, your integrity is everything in terms of building trust and maintaining trust within the community. In terms of you cannot lie during investigations, so your integrity and lying, that is something that just will not and cannot be tolerated because it breaks trust.
Thank you. Next question for Jose. Each of you has spoken of the need to strengthen community-based partnerships. Why are they important to you, and describe how you will collaborate with community-based organizations to meet the needs of the community that the Sheriff's Office serves?
Thank you. So prior to becoming sheriff, I had relationships with Bridges to Independence, Path Forward, OAR, SIFA. I know people, I recognize people here. So the relationships that you have, I didn't start these relationships when it occurred to me that I wanted to run for sheriff. I started these relationships when I met people face to face for what they are. So building relationships and having relationships is key to having partnerships. I'm very proud to say that I've been married for over 17 years, and that's a relationship. So relationships are super important, whether it's at work, personal, and working with community partners. I think the Sheriff's Office has an extreme opportunity. We're very lucky that we already have these relationships, but keeping them is just as important. And you need a leader that understands corrections. While I can appreciate, and with all due respect, everyone's background, we're talking about corrections. That is the bulk of the responsibility of the sheriff. We are law enforcement certified, and we do partner with the police department. But if I sit here and tell you that we're patrolling and doing all these things, that's not what we do. We work in corrections so that when the police bring it, police have to take the folks they arrest somewhere. And that's where they bring them, to the sheriff's office. So you need someone that understands corrections and can keep those
Thank you.
relationships going.
Next question is for Wanda. Same question. Why are community-based partnerships important to you, and describe how you will collaborate with community-based organizations to meet the needs of the community that the Sheriff's Office serves?
Sure. Partnering with the police department is extremely important, and while the Sheriff's Office's main role is corrections, service of summonses, and the safety of the court, the Sheriff's Office is also fully certified in law enforcement. So there is no reason why the Sheriff's Office cannot be more engaged in the community in terms of whether it's extra presence in the community, in terms of being with our youth as mentors. So there's no reason why a fully law enforcement certified Sheriff's Department cannot be more involved within the community. In terms of other organizations, Offender Aid and Restoration is something that the Sheriff's Department is already partnering with. I would like to partner with Arm in Arm. They provide services not just for people who live in Arlington, but people who live in Maryland and DC as well. Most people may not realize, but the majority of the people in the Sheriff's Department are not all Arlington residents. Some live in DC, some live in Maryland, and with Arm in Arm, they service those three areas and beyond that. So it's important to not just partner with Arlington based organizations, but with an organization that can reach outside of Arlington, where the majority of the people who are incarcerated often live. So I think that not just OAR, SIFA. I attended an event with SIFA a few months ago, a restorative circle.
Thank you. Last question. James, same question. Why are community-based partnerships important to you, and describe how you will collaborate with community-based organizations to meet the needs of the community that the Sheriff's Office serves?
So I remember when I started working in Southeast DC, and the first shooting I worked and the last shooting I worked were effectively the same shooting, and a lot of things followed the same trajectory. We would respond, we would address the needs of the victim, and then we would try to canvass amongst people who had witnessed or we thought had witnessed the crime. And more often than not, people wouldn't want to tell us anything because there was no trust amongst us DC police officers. I come over to Arlington County, and thankfully we don't have nearly as many shootings, but when we do work major crimes, I am inundated with information that the community wants to provide because there is Arlington County Police Department. And I think that that's kind of part and parcel with the relationship that the community needs to have with the law enforcement entities that are the Sheriff's Office and are the police department, is that there needs to be trust, because we are only as good as the information given to us by the community. Conversely, we need to work with organizations, but we also need to reach out to people who are typically not even involved with us, because there's so many services, there's so many government employees who live in Arlington who can help bridge the gap for mental health services. It can help bridge the gap for financial services that individuals may need when they leave custody. And going to the community and having people fully buy in, having local businesses say, I got a help wanted sign, I can't find anyone. Maybe you have someone who can help fill this vacancy. Those relationships are absolutely crucial for the success of people beyond custody and for the success of local law enforcement entities. Thank you.
Next question is for Wanda. Some would describe that this has been an acrimonious campaign. Some in the community believe it has become unnecessarily so, especially as our children and young people are watching. What can you and your campaign do to reduce the vitriol?
I think it's important that first we tell the truth, we be truthful, and that we have integrity, especially if we're interacting with our youth, we're going to be mentors for our youth. We have to be truthful. While some of the information may be hard to hear, it is the truth, and it's important that the community knows. It's important that as the head of a law enforcement agency, that you uphold the highest standards, which is integrity, and lying is one of those issues that you cannot have a second chance. When you lie, you erode the trust of the community. How can you be an effective mentor for our youth? While some acts deserve second chances, lying does not, and it's important that everyone knows the truth of the issues that are being brought to you, the truth about the candidates, the truth about the campaign, the truth about the experience, because the Sheriff's Department is the head constitutional officer for Arlington County, and that particular role should be taken more seriously as opposed to just corrections, or as opposed to just being a cop. It's a law enforcement constitutional officer where we are responsible for the constitutional rights of every citizen in Arlington County, whether it's in the community, whether it's within our detention facility. And it's important that those in the community understand
Thank you.
those truths.
Next question is for James. James, same question. What can you and your campaign do to reduce the vitriol?
So I think I'm just going to keep doing the same thing that I've been doing, which is what I do as a police officer and what I do as a coach. And I just tell people kind of what I see that we can change, and, you know, to quote Gandhi, be the change that I want to see in the world. And I tell my rowers that I couldn't care less about the medals they rack up or the success that they have, that ultimately they are high school rowers. My first goal as a coach is to make them better people every day, a little bit at a time. And when I'm an officer on the streets and I'm working with someone who doesn't necessarily want to buy into what has to happen, whether they may end up having to go into custody, they may have to receive some services that they don't feel interested in receiving, I try to educate them and just say, here's everything that has to happen. Here's the law that's compelling me to do these things. And, you know, ultimately, this is a free country and you can choose your own decisions, but I have to make decisions in response to that. But I really do hope that you'll work with me, because if we all work together, this will be a much smoother process and we can get through everything and we can get the help that is needed. So that's kind of how I try to focus on the campaign, is just trying to be informative, educate people, and allow them to be led to make the best possible decision that they think is necessary for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Jose. It's been a nasty campaign. Some in the community believe it has become unnecessarily so, especially as our children and young people are watching. What can you and your campaign do to reduce the vitriol?
Well, as someone who has 2 teenagers at home, they're watching everything and they're listening to everything. And they see how people are treating each other. And that's important. You know, we can have differences, we can agree, not agree, we can have issues, we can think someone's this and that. But being professional and honestly answering the question, you know, a lot of the times you avoid the question by bringing up things that are distracting. So I think that if we want to be the difference, and we talk about the youth and auxiliary and going into the schools and making a difference, we can make a difference. We're the example. We're the ones sitting up here as leaders. The 3 people up here are leaders. It's not easy to be sitting up here and putting yourself out there. So as leaders, be professional, lead by example, show the youth that we can agree, not agree, but we can still respect each other and be professional. Thank you.
Next question, James. Incarceration rates. Do you believe that it is the role of the sheriff's office to keep incarceration rates down? If so, what are you doing or will you commit to doing to bring down incarceration rates?
Thank you for the question. So I mentioned earlier about the HARP program that Chesterfield's doing, and they've been reviewed by PhD candidates from University of Richmond and other institutions. They've been reviewed by independent auditors, and they have a roughly 20%, if not higher, amongst the graduates of their programs reduction in recidivism. And so, tying into the whole education, tying into getting people connected to resources, making sure those resources fit the individual rather than just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, trying to get the resources that that particular individual needs, and ideally with someone who has a connection with them, is crucial for reducing or for bringing down recidivism. I think working additionally with attorneys, both the public defender's office, any defense attorneys, working with the Commonwealth attorneys, and working with the legislature, because many times we can implement laws and they have second and third order effects that we're not even aware of, or they might have an application that wasn't intended when the legislators wrote the law. And again, that ties back to education, just constantly advocating for communities, constantly advocating for the deputies, constantly advocating for the change that we want to see and what we want our society to look like going forward. And I think the sheriff is in a special role to kind of use the bully pulpit that they have to bring about that change and to inform the community about the very unique issues that impact public safety.
Thank you. Next question, Jose. Same question. Do you believe it is the role of the sheriff's office to keep incarceration rates down? If so, what are you doing or will you commit to doing to bring down those incarceration rates?
So in our role, we receive folks that are arrested by the police. They're seen by the magistrate, probable cause, and then they're accepted by the sheriff. We accept everyone that is seen by this magistrate and there's probable cause. We can't decide no. Everyone who's has no bond or the magistrate determines that we're going to hold, we hold. So once they're in the care of the sheriff, there's an opportunity to make a difference. I have a community readiness unit. It's one of the housing units inside the jail that's dedicated specifically for those that are re-entering the community. We have amazing staff that are dedicated to ensuring that when someone gets back into the community, they have the resources that they need to be successful. What does that mean? Parenting skills, anger management, sex education, mentorship, leadership. We have someone from the county that comes into the housing unit and talks about fatherhood. What about if you never had a father? What about if your father passed? What about if you didn't have that role model growing up? So we have partnerships with the county, and this gentleman comes in and we facilitate a father's group. That's how you make change. Now you're gonna put someone back into the community that has the resources to be a successful parent and make a difference in their child's lives. Keeping families connected is extremely important to me. So I think that there is an opportunity.
Thank you. Wanda, same question. Do you believe it is the role of the sheriff's office to keep incarceration rates down? If so, what are you doing or will you commit to doing to bring down incarceration rates?
Yes, I do believe it's the role of the sheriff's office to assist in keeping incarceration rates down. The sheriff's office is already partnering with Offender Aid and Restoration, who provides services to assist to reduce recidivism. I think it's also important to partner with and be involved with the Commonwealth Attorney in terms of restorative practices, as well as CYFA, who has restorative practices as well. That is important to be a part of that. It's also important for us to have an auxiliary deputy sheriff's program where we are interacting with our youth before they become incarcerated. If we can get them before, as opposed to when they're already in jail, and to keep them from recidivizing, but if we can get them at the young age. I started when I was 16. I know the importance of a positive role model with the sheriff's office. So if we get to our youth at a young age, we be the mentor and the role model for our youth, then we can provide the education, the training. We can partner with CYFA. I know CYFA has the teen court. They have peer programs. There's a teen network center where teens advocate for their own positions within the community. So it's important that we meet our youth where they are and provide the types of assistance
Thank
and
you.
partnerships.
The next question is going to go quickly, but I think that the audience will appreciate it. So I'm just going to ask you to pass, you can do it, hold on to the mic. Describe yourself with one word.
Integrity.
Compassionate.
Oh, that's.
You don't have a minute and a half.
I know. I'll just say courageous.
All right, thank you. And we're coming to our closing question. We'll be starting with Jose. Other than recruitment, what do you foresee as being the biggest challenge in corrections and policing nationally that could affect Arlington within the next 10 years? And what are some solutions to those challenges?
Wow. The $1 million question, the challenges. I'd love to have this, we call it the average daily population, the head count in the jail at 0, 2, 5. So providing services, if we can provide services in the facility, get folks back into the community, being productive, they never come back, then the sheriff's office can be out patrolling, working with our police partners, and building a safe community. But as it stands, we have the jail. So while we have it, my job and my vision and my passion is to ensure that we can provide the best resources for folks to get back into the community. Now, some folks unfortunately have to stay in the facility, in the system, whether it's the courts, the sheriff's role is not to determine that. But while they're in my care, my role is to ensure that we pour in as many resources as we can to build folks. I recently went to a Toastmasters, so I want to bring Toastmasters in to my staff so that they can learn how to work on their public speaking. And there's so many resources out there. Really, you touched on a lot, Juanita, as far as community partnerships. We're very lucky in this county that we have folks that want to give back. We had a robust, and I'm bringing back our robust volunteer program. Due to COVID, we had to tamper that down, but the volunteer program is coming back
Thank you.
to the jail.
Wanda, same question. Other than recruitment, what do you foresee as being the biggest challenge in corrections and policing nationally that could affect Arlington within the next 10 years? And what are some solutions to those challenges?
I think the continued mental health crisis and the opioid crisis is a huge issue within the community and may likely continue to be an issue. Therefore, we have to be as proactive as possible. It's time that we implement practices beyond the biometric in terms of having physicians and psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, paramedics, so that we can address not only the medical condition, but the mental health condition as well. As stated previously, we don't control who is brought into our facility, but we have a role in making sure that those in our care receive the best care. We're responsible for them 24/7. So I would say the mental health and opioid crisis, because not only within the community, but if someone is incarcerated, oftentimes we have a lot of people within the facility who have underlying medical and mental health issues. So I see that as going to be a problem within the community that we have to continue to be a leader in addressing those issues. Thank you.
And last but not least, James, other than recruitment, what do you foresee as being the biggest challenge in corrections and policing nationally that could affect Arlington within the next 10 years? And what do you propose as some solutions to those challenges?
Thank you for the question. I think the issue is and will remain for some time communication. I think anyone who's been in law enforcement can tell you that we operate in silos and we like to keep our stuff separate from your stuff, separate from their stuff, and law enforcement just does not play nice even with other law enforcement. And I'm getting some chuckles, so I have some people who are in the know. So communication, and it's funny, in an age where we have digital media, we have email, we have phones at the ready, I find oftentimes no one seems to have any idea what the heck is going on. You know, whether it's, are we charging this person with this? Are they being released under these conditions? What is the situation. And you know, you would think that the Potomac River is this impenetrable barrier because we have no idea what goes on in DC, and Maryland is the dark side of the moon. We don't have any knowledge at all. So bridging those communication gaps and getting everyone on the same page, especially in a region like ours where you go over to Fairfax County or Alexandria or Falls Church and no one knows what anyone's doing. So talking and working through the problem, understanding what people's capabilities are, understanding what their training is, understanding where their shortfalls are and our shortfalls are, so we can help cover down on everyone's gaps and provide better service to everyone and be better law enforcement. We saw with 9/11 what happens when agencies operate in a silo, and there was a lot of legislation that was passed to try to address that, but we are creeping back into old habits. So
Thank
I hope
you.
we can change that.
Thank you for your thoughtful responses. We're not having closing statements, but if we could give a hand for all three of our candidates.